All right, everybody. Welcome to the Temple podcast. I am joined by the beautiful Juliet Tang today. I've been desiring to have Juliet on the show for quite some time now. I know that her teachings and transmission are going to bless you so, so deeply. Our audience is really filled with devotional women, women that really embody both the womb and the heart. And so, thank you for being here with us today, Juliet.
Thank you, Holly.
I would love for you to introduce yourself if you want to share with us a little bit about who you be and the current mission that's on your heart and what you're currently serving and offering through your mission in the world.
Ooh, okay. I'm gonna start by saying that I've been serving women for the last, it feels like for the last decade. I started off very much supporting women in business, marketing, sales mastery, and I really just started noticing that was prior to 2020. And I started noticing like there were just a lot of gaps. Like women could take a business mastermind, like a whole bunch of women would take a business mastermind and they would get such different results. And that actually led me more into the somatics, into the body, and into female nervous system. So around COVID time, I actually left New Age and I was called by Jesus to come home to him, to the Father. And I'm going to say for the first couple of years, I was so focused on supporting women repair their relationship with God, with Father, with men, with masculine. And my work is still very much, this layer is still very much alive. But what's um, also very potent that's in my field in this season is actually supporting women to deepen into their relationship with mother, with the feminine, with the body, with the nervous system, with the bleed, really through their female physiology. I don't teach like a mother out there somewhere like an entity or a deity, but more like that maternal resonance that is found in every single woman because we are all, we all came to the earth with the womb. And for me, the deeper that I go into my womb, the more it is that I feel like, um, I'm just feeling this maternal resonance that is so embedded in the tissues and the bleed that she is almost like she's a very silent and at the same time very creational type of current that's not often talked about. And I'm especially naming this because I feel a lot of women came, in the last few years, they've been coming to me to heal their relationship with the masculine, specifically their relationship with God. With men, they probably had some of that boss babe mentality. I don't need no men type of thing going in the past. And then a lot of women kind of did a 180 and went straight into the other extreme of like wanting to be someone wanted to be trad wives, whereas the others want more of the traditional masculine feminine values. And I feel in the devotional feminine space that focus has been so on repairing our relationship with the masculine spiritually, emotionally, erotically, psychologically. And it is true, it's so rightful, it's kind of like a natural rite of passage that I feel that a lot of women, especially in the modern day world, living in a world that is so distorted in terms of masculine, feminine energetics, that it is a rightful rite of passage. And at the same time, it is actually not complete because until we can kind of be in deep service to her. And when I say her, I mean female physiology, womb, heart, um, our cyclical wisdom, our maternal resonance, and just our body and somatics in general. Until we can be in deep service of her, we really don't have the capacity or the nuance to be able to in service, to be in deep service to him.
Mhm.
So what I'm feeling is that more and more women are kind of just feeling that missing link, and they're coming back to like this really beautiful wholeness that's not just like it's always I need more of him. I need him to penetrate me deeper. I need God to be giving me that next step because a lot of the times we can actually um get into somewhat of a collapse fawning state and that there's that over dependency on like I need a masculine to be this for me, but we're not really holding ourselves from within so we don't have the capacity to receive more of him.
Mm.
So my passion this season that I'm feeling so strongly is actually nourishing, allowing women to come into deep nourishment and the walk with the feminine and the mother so that we can then go into the wholeness of the ecosystem of, that relational repair with the masculine.
Mm. Oh, yes, that's so beautiful. It's the true codes of union,
Yeah.
right? And I love how you're sharing that it was rightful and initiatory as a rite of passage for the collective feminine to repair their relationship with God the Father with the masculine principle. And we don't stop there, right? There's this next devotional layer that you're speaking to so beautifully about embodying the mother, and bringing her into our devotional union. So, one of the things that I love about your work, Julia, is how you track so beautifully from a bird's eye view the currents in the collective, where we've been and where we're going. And one of the things that you had shared in one of your teachings inside of Way of Grace was that the New Age was all about her, right? It was all about her and embodiment and like erotic liberation. And then that pendulum swing into repairing our relationship with the masculine. But then when we go too far into that, the her then becomes missing. So how do you feel like what do you sense when you track? What do you sense is next for the feminine collective to integrate the descent that we embodied in the New Age by deeply embodying her and the devotion from our faith journey? Like how do we bridge those two? How do we bring those two into union?
Yeah, it's actually through the body because the body is the bridge, and specifically through the womb because the womb is I'm gonna say the female pelvis is our somatic center. This is like a gravitational center in which all of our female experiences are birthed very much through the womb. So the one thing that I do want to share because I was in New Age for years is that even though um, there was a focus on the feminine. It was oftentimes more of a wounded maiden, like an unintegrated maiden shadow, an unintegrated bride and lover shadow, as opposed to an embodied, grounded feminine that is actually anchored in the body. Like I very much felt that, especially, I know both of us are probably familiar with a lot of the goddess, divine feminine teachings back in the day, and it felt like there were a lot of very pretty and alluring teachings and concepts, but they were not necessarily grounded in the body, even in the tantric world. Whereas I do, like a big number of my clients actually come from that world, even though some of the practices they do feel aligned, but a lot of the times they're just not truly rooted in I'm going to say in the truth of our female physiology, like the biological and the creational truth. Like a specific example that I'm just thinking about is I've had women coming to me who were in the tantric world, who were more like they used their sexual energy as a transactional currency to get something that they wanted, as opposed to just being in this more self-contained space and truly cherishing the essence of their womanhood. So I just want to like make the differentiation that I feel because of the pendulum swing from more of a distorted, ungrounded feminine to like this over focus and fixation on the masculine, which by the way was very natural. That was like that next step progression. To what we're coming into is more of an integration, deeper like that middle path. And I feel a lot of women. what they're feeling is that, going more from that new age space into that polarity space, which is mostly like the last few years, that trend has been so big. There's still that ungroundedness. It's not very much rooted in the literacy of the body. It's a lot of the polarity teachings are they feel very linear to me. They land in a very flat way. They don't hold a lot of nuance. And that's because we're not anchored in the body. Because the moment you guide a woman deep into her womb, into her pelvis, into her nervous system, into like the very non-linear ebbs and flows of her essence, you're going to discover like a woman is anything but linear. She's anything but black and white. She's anything but it's like he leads and she follows, right? Something that's very flat. She's not flat. She's very volumetric.
Mm.
She's very multidimensional. And this type of embodied knowledge, more like an embodied knowing, it's not something that you can learn from just, a program where it's a lot of like mental teachings, even though those do help. It's very much you actually going into the descent of your womb, walking with your rhythms, truly arriving in that underworld, gathering your resources in the underworld, facing a lot of the past and integrated shadows, wounds, patterns, meeting parts of yourself that have, that you've been hiding or like avoiding and then just creating enough body safety and spaciousness to be tending to all of those parts and then coming back up into the heart. And then that process really allows a woman to be living not just in her body, but deeply in her tissues and in her blood and in her flesh. And that, like, usually what I see is that when I guide women through this process, they actually don't need a ton of teachings because they automatically kind of like remember what it's like to live from the space of that capacity and nuance and integration. And what I'm feeling more and more is that um, I'm seeing more women kind of naming the middle path. I'm
Mm.
seeing more women saying something like, well, maybe I've been completely obsessed with the masculine, and it's time for me to come home to my own body and the wholeness of my woman, and to actually navigate the many faces of my woman, maiden, bride, lover, mother, elder. I've also seen women coming to the space of it's not just her or him. It's very much the union of both. And I can think of one organ that actually houses union in a woman's body, and that's actually the womb. She is, outside of her procreational capacity, she is actually the organ of union, in like literally embodied union, because this is the organ, this is the relational organ that receives masculine light, feeds the light, and produces the fruit of union. So she's this is just like the mother organ in the female body, where the moment we start to like breathe into her, attune to her, move, kind of like move into her rhythms, a woman just starts to remember more and more like who it's not just like her role on this planet, but more like her true biological and creational purpose,
Mm.
which is very much like housing union.
Mhm. Oh, yeah, that spoke to that so beautifully. As you shared that the womb is the organ of union, I just felt full body chills through my body, like, yes, yes, it is. And I'm curious to hear you share, Juliet. One of the things I love that you teach about is the difference between like a self-pleasure practice and a self-presence practice. So I'd love for you to speak about for the woman that's ready to deepen more into that middle path and really embody true union through her womb and through her womanhood. what are some practices or tools that she can utilize? Because I feel that this is a point of confusion for a lot of women that are coming out of the New Age tantric space. They're like, okay, my sex magic practice is distorted, my extractive self-pleasure practice is distorted. So how do I connect to my womb, awaken my eros, and embody my fertility in my womb space as a woman? I'd love for you to speak to that.
Yeah, I feel that we probably have assigned a very limiting definition to pleasure because the first thing a lot of us think about is sexual pleasure, but it's a part of it. But actually, I'm going to say pleasure is a very deep component of our female nervous system capacity and safety. But the pleasure that I'm talking about is actually just pleasurable sensations, kind of like even when you just look outside the window and you're seeing beautiful leaves and you're seeing, maybe flowers are blooming and there's a bird singing. That is pleasure to your system. One very simple like pleasure practice is literally kind of just like very light touch, running your finger on your skin and just anchoring yourself in that feather light touch, which actually produces oxytocin in your body. Oxytocin is the love hormone. That is the hormone that allows us to regulate more deeply. It's one of the master hormones. So just like self-touching without any goal in mind, literally just allowing yourself to feel your skin and anchor into your body and be with your felt senses. That is a pleasure practice. Any kind of pleasure practice is something that allows you to feel that a pleasurable felt sense. So in that sense, I'm going to say the pleasure practice and the presence practice, they're almost like I can almost use them interchangeably, right? Because I feel a lot of us were, especially if we were more in an unintegrated maiden shadow, we were in that more like transactional paradigm. We could easily go into a practice when we were in New Age that is not oxytocin inducing. That's just us going in with that dopamine, hoping to get something out of it.
Mhm.
So the
You're breaking up a little bit, love. You're freezing a little bit.
senses and creating enough safety to be able to experience pleasurable sensations. That is super important because that is something that anchors us deeper in the body. So, um, a lot of the women that I feel if they're kind of like more in that beginner stage of just starting to descend into their wombs and they feel like there's just so much, I don't know what to do about it, I don't know where to go. A very, very tangible start point is actually to start attuning to the cyclical rhythms of our bleed. And I'm not talking about cycle syncing. I know that's it's pretty popular. I'm not saying it's bad. I feel like it's a very it's a bit simplified. And at the end of the day, it is also a bit of biohacking because it's just the female anatomy is way more complex and intelligent than saying, well, you're in your ovulation right now, you should be collaborating with other women and going out and socializing. It's just more complicated than that. But I will say that our nervous system is cyclical and it very much follows our monthly bleed. So I would say start tracking, dedicate 30 days, journal every single day what it feels like to be your body, what is arising, what are some of the felt senses that are coursing through your body, and what day of your cycle is. Like, I feel like that's one of the most tangible ways to start deepening into our, just the female nervous system and also our kind of like how our woman flows throughout the cycle. And literally just pay attention to how you feel, um, see what is arising, feel into what day of the month it is, and at the same time, bring your hands to your body every day, even just for a few moments. Non-sexual touch, again, it's something that anchors us into our body, into our presence. It signals to our nervous system, it's safe, I'm safe, it's safe for me to be here. And it produces oxytocin because we very much need that love hormone to thrive. So yeah, just a few very simple practices.
Beautiful. Yeah, thanks for sharing those. I would say that's the most common question that I receive from women is like, how do I connect, how, because it's kind of thrown the baby out with the bathwater. And now it's like, how do I connect to my womb and my eros and my pleasure and my sensuality in a way that truly honors my body as a temple of the Holy Spirit? And I'm curious to hear from you. How would you define eros? Like, how has your definition and how you relate to eros changed as you've shifted and evolved in your maturation in your womanhood journey?
Yeah, great question. I would say in the beginning, maybe a few years ago, when I was more in that boss babe space, Eros felt like just like magnetism. I feel like at the time, probably a lot of women, but especially me, was just so, I was so obsessed with like being magnetic. Maybe there are some practices that I could do to be more magnetic. Oh, I wanted to be more magnetic online. So it was all that like looking back, it was actually me very much projecting my energy out into the world. And again, like, I'm not saying that's wrong because during ovulation, our cervix is very much in the torsion, where she is in her centripetal force. There is a bit of that current coming up from the womb, from the cervix up to the heart, up like to the throat. There's a bit of that like projected out type of energy. So I'm not gonna say like that projecting out energy is wrong. I will say like it's not sustainable. And again, it's a very linear, non-nuanced way. The past version of me looked at Eros. And the deeper it is that I go into the relational teachings of, the feminine and God, how how we are in union with men and also the relational essence of the womb. I deeply feel that Eros is actually intimacy. It is intimacy. And it's a quality that every single woman embodies because physiologically, we are actually born um, not only to offer the world intimacy, we're actually intimacy itself, which is so interwoven, I feel, into the heart of God, into the beingness of Jesus, because, and this is something I've been actually sitting in quite a bit just these last few weeks. Um, Jesus is so many things. God is so many things. And, when you read the Bible, I remember in the beginning, I was just always marveling in the wonders, the miracles. There's so many things that I can say about God. And lately, what He's been guiding me into is that very relational component of God. So much so that I feel, um, the one of the main teachings of Jesus and of his ministry when he walked on earth over 2,000 years ago was actually helping us remember what it means to be in relationship. Not just relationship with the Father, but actually relationship with one another. And when you look at the female body, it's like we are literally made for relationship. Men run on dopamine. This is why they are productive. This is why they're very good with checklists, to-do lists, with like just going out and getting stuff done. But if you put a woman on high levels of dopamine every single day, she's gonna perish. Because if we are only chasing after dopamine, it actually depletes our oxytocin. And we absolutely need, like desperately need oxytocin. That's what feeds us from the inside out. Even when you think about how men and women relate to emergency situations, there was a study that was done in which they measured when men when the group of men encountered emergency, their bodies started producing like adrenaline, because they needed to quickly get into like that fight or flight response, either to fight the enemy or to remove their loved ones from harm. When women, the group of women, when they were, when they encountered some kind of emergency situation, their bodies actually started producing oxytocin.
Mm,
They needed to bond. They needed to be kind of like the glue of the community, to be the heart, to be soothing those that are hurt, to be talking, sharing words of encouragement and love. So it's not a surprise that I remember, I think it was John Eldridge in that beautiful book, Captivating. He said that when God made Eve, he made her to be a relationship specialist.
yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I can truly feel why. And I didn't truly like embody that level of knowing, intimately knowing it until I started becoming just more literate over my female physiology, over the part of oxytocin, how we bond, how we need to bond, and also, how much we are the ones with the womb. Again, that womb is that relational organ. The womb is what feeds that new life, nurtures the new life until the new life is ready to be birthed. So every part of us is actually built to be relational. And this to me is like the embodiment of Eros. It's to be relational, it's to be intimate. And at the end of the day, it's really like we're literally just mirroring God's heart because he is relational, he is intimate. Anything else about God, that people say, like he's this, he's that. Yes, he's all those things. But at the heart, at the soul, at the core of it, God is relational. Just the fact that he exists as an eternal community of three, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And they're always glorifying one another, revealing one another. Like just the fact alone, just tells us like he's not just the definition of love. He's actually the verb, the beingness and the doing of love. Love is always given and received within this eternal community of God. And for the feminine, like this is truly what we embody: intimacy, love, and devotion.
So beautiful, Juliet. So beautiful. Yeah, we're literally designed. I love that that quote you shared that Eve was the relationship expert. And this is the thing, right? It's about embracing our differences as men and women. I love also too that you're sharing so much biological information around if we as women try to be like men and move through dopamine and ignore our cyclical cycle, we wither. What do you feel are some of the side effects of a woman that is not truly embodying her feminine design and nervous system? Like, what do you see as some of that perishing and withering? How does that show up for women?
Oh my goodness. I mean, I can just name the symptoms I had from the past version of myself. I struggled with my bleed for so long. I had horrible PMS. I would say usually the very first symptoms usually always manifest through the womb. Like her cycle becomes really off. It's either that it becomes irregular, or she stops ovulating altogether, or she has very painful bleed that's just like that. She wishes that, she could be put on pills just to stop herself from bleeding altogether. Fibroids, endometriosis, any type of pain and growth in the pelvis is a very, very strong signal that it's not a punishment. It's not even like I know I call it a symptom. It's not, it's really the body signaling like, oh, there is a level of severance
Mm.
from you and your woman right now. So most of these very much manifest within the pelvis, and infertility is one of them. Then on our energy level, it just shows up like we're always exhausted, or we're always running on hyperarousal, needing to drink coffee all day. Needing to follow a checklist, a to-do list. As the dopamine is running high, there is less room for bonding, for pleasure, meaning presence, for even for like sexual pleasure, our libido usually just kind of like plummets. We don't feel radiant, we don't feel sexual, we don't feel turned on. We're just kind of like always needing to chase after a certain high. And another thing that I've been really deepening into from more of a nervous system, female nervous system perspective, is that when we're in that very dopamine driven state, we actually do not have much nervous system capacity to experience sensation, to experience the complicity of life. And sensation applies to everything. Deeper love, deeper intimacy, needing to have that difficult conversation with your husband so that you can use it as a growth portal. Doing a launch and sales are not going well, and you're like navigating that void. That being able to have the capacity or being able to hold nuance within ourselves is literally everything for the female system. When we're in that very dopamine driven, hyper vigilant, kind of like fake aroused, state, we are operating in a very, very linear black and white fashion, which means that there's just not enough spaciousness, there's not enough safety within the system to be holding nuance and holding the experiences that we really want to create in any area in life, relationship, business, money, our experience with God. It would actually become very black and white. And this is something like I've seen even in women's walks with God, that if we cannot hold the nuance, it becomes a very kind of like it would usually swing into more of that religious extreme. The Bible becomes a rule book, and following Jesus becomes like projecting judgment and moral superiority. So that's literally the middle path because it is the path of integration. It's the path of nuance. And the two extremes are like the linear black and white thinking because we don't have the safety, we don't have the spaciousness to hold all of it.
Yes. Yeah, I love that you're bringing that piece up as well. It's as you're sharing that, the vision, what I'm receiving as a vision is like the feminine as like the roots of the tree. And the more she's rooted, the more capacity she has to receive the light and to grow up high. But if she's in that dopamine state, she's actually uprooted. She doesn't have the capacity, and that's what creates the withering. And this is really where our walk with God is so valuable because it's our trust and faith in God that allows us to feel safe, to not have the to-do list, to step out of that dopamine driven reality and to actually rest in our feminine. So this is the turning point for a lot of women. I think there's a lot of women that know that they're living outside of their biological design as a woman. They desire to make the shift to really water their woman and come into full fruition, but they're scared to do it. They're scared to take their hands off the wheel. They're scared to let go of control and step into deeper surrender. So, what would you say to those women that are knowing maybe their body's giving them symptoms, maybe they're just deeply knowing that it's ready to come back home to her? But what would you say to the woman that's afraid to descend back into her feminine?
Yeah, it's not like the past version of me would be like, oh, here's what you need to do. And then I'm like, I've been sitting in a space of like, our bodies are so brilliant because they're in their perfect design by God. Even when we're having symptoms or having pains and complaints, it's because the body is doing it from that self-protection space. It's a self-protection mechanism for self-preservation. That's how the body is made. Every single symptom is literally like a love note from the God that's a messenger. So I'm gonna say like working with the female body is a pretty complex, nuanced, and
Mhm.
um, kind of like a slow drip, living, breathing walk, not so much like this is something that I can change overnight. The first thing that I would invite these women to do is just actually to stop labeling what their bodies are doing, good or bad. Maybe it's like, oh, I'm having the pain, I'm having the growth, I'm having insomnia. My libido is not, it's not where I want it to be. I don't feel radiant. Like, stop making the body wrong because the body is actually in her rightfulness to be showing you these messages so that you can be, supporting her in the long run in a way that you can create something that feels sustainable and nourishing. Um, the second thing is I personally feel I am a strong believer in female physiology literacy. So growing up, we've kind of surrendered literacy of our bodies to everybody else, to the government, maybe to like healthcare practitioners, to doctors. It's not a coincidence that this is the reason why the way that we were programmed in the past, at least I can speak for myself, is that once a year you go for your pelvic exam where you lay on a table, you get your cervix scraped, and then you see if if your pap smear comes back normal. And if it's normal, okay, that's great. I don't need to do this for another year. I forget about my body. I'm just going to continue living my life, right? So it's not a coincidence that we live in a society that actually reinforces that level of severance. We have no sovereignty over our bodies. We have zero literacy over our bodies. Most of us don't, we've never touched our cervix. We don't know what she looks like. We can't really feel her. A lot of us actually have very numb cervixes. I was again one of them, frozen cervix for a long time. So I feel that this is the time that women say, it's not my fault that I grew up in a world that encourages me to be severed from my body, but it is my responsibility to be body sovereign. And this means taking the time, even if it's just 1 hour a week, taking the time to um, to gain literacy over your body, gain literacy over, at least your bleed, your tissues, your yoni, your cervix, your womb, their biological, their creational functions. Start to become more attuned to them, start to feel into them, start to communicate with them. And from there, the way that I teach women is just through a lot of hands-on practices, actually, because I feel that the medicine of our touch is so missing in the world. We probably wait for our partners and husbands. We want them to touch us the right way. Or we probably learned from, past distorted practices like this is how I, give myself an orgasm. But I'm talking about attuned non-sexual touch with full presence, to be able to feel into your tissues and mobilize your tissues. That's your clitoris, your labias, your vulva, your cervix. Work with them in such a way that we actually become so attuned to their language. We get curious what stories are held inside of these tissues, what sensations and emotions haven't been completed and moved, and what they want us to know about our women, and work with these tissues in a way that we can deepen into how much we anchor into our body and our into our pelvises. For me, like, these are usually the three things I teach women right away if they're like really wanting to know more about how to how to go from this boss babe or living from above the neck or living from my solar plexus into a woman who is living from her pelvis, from her womb. I call it womb-centered living, not because womb is the only organ that matters. It's really like she's just kind of like very much at the center of the entire ecosystem because so many nerves innervate the female pelvis. And for us, we're 80% afferent, meaning like it's just, the 80% of our sensory information comes from the root up into the brain, and then the 20% is like from the brain down. So this, the pelvis truly holds a lot of gravity and a lot of weight in terms of who we be in this world, how we show up, how we communicate, how we emanate our frequency. Everything truly comes down to the body. And then it's just like she's always the bridge. Everything that we're thinking about, like how do I do this? How do I do that? I'm like, come back to the body. She's the bridge.
Mm-hmm. That's it, right? So that's really it for the woman that's afraid to make that step. It's she's still coming at it from a mental perspective of what steps do I need to take? What do I need to do? And the solution is just come into your body and your body will tell you, your body will show you, your body will guide you. Yeah. Um, I'm curious for you to for us to explore a little bit about the word desire, because that's coming through here. That's, I think, another point of confusion that women are in right now
Mhm.
of how does a woman, as she deepens in her relationship and union with God, and as she opens her vessel more to receive his seeding and inspiration, how does a woman sanctify her relationship with desire? Right? Because I know that, again, coming out of the sexual liberation space and new age spaces, it was all about, follow your impulse, follow your desire. And there's rightfulness in that. The etymology of desire means of the Father, right? So what do you feel is the process for a woman that's in that sanctification process around her relationship with her desire?
Okay. Um, yeah. It's gonna be a super nuanced answer. It's a lot of the times when we're still in that space, that more of that new age, tantric or transactional space, our desire, it's not that the desire is bad, it's that it is rooted in an integrated maiden shadow and an integrated lover shadow. So even, I'll give an example. Even years ago, when a lot of women came out of that space and immediately jumped on the train of like, I want to be a trad wife. I need to marry a man with a huge farm where we can go, homesteading. And I'm just going to raise chickens and I'll be in my beautiful dress, baking sourdough all day. And I'm like, it is a rightful desire. And at the same time, it feels ungrounded because it does not feel like this desire has penetrated you, has been purified by your own womb descent, and that's the feeling. Like we have the desire, we all have the desire to be protected and provided for. But that's going to look very, very specific to each woman based on the season that she's in, based on her relational intimacy with men, with herself, with God. So there's no generalized, we all need to be homesteading and raising chickens,
Mhm.
right? And that there was like a huge craze of that. In my own experience, the way that I've actually sanctified my desires was it came very naturally after I went into a very deep womb descent. So what happened was that I just for years I was having a lot of bleed issues, cycle issues, very painful PMS. And that was actually what I prayed to God every single day, and Jesus was like, you need to go into your womb. Like you're going to remember your wholeness and your restoration in the womb. Because I was actually very resistant to God. I was like, Father, I just want to pray to you all day. And like, I want to receive the miracle. He's like, well, you know what? It's great. I'm going to guide you, but you need to do the work. So that was actually how I even started this journey to begin with years ago. What happened was that as I descended into the tissues of my vulva, my yoni, my cervix, my womb, and I also do a lot of hands-on work every single day. It's just part of the work I do, part of the work I teach to mobilize the tissues, adhesion, scar tissue, things like that. So the more I mobilized my tissues and they felt very frozen, the more I met a lot of unresolved stories, my own maiden shadows, my own lover shadows that were kind of just like incomplete stories and emotions and sensations that kind of were living inside of the tissues and encoded the tissues in such a way that it actually even changed my fascia. So as I was doing a lot of this work, I was in my descent for a good 3, 4 years. I just felt like I was on this endless, deep healing journey, navigating every single thing that got hidden in my underworld. And it felt really dark and it felt really scary. Um, and in in that season, I was unable to even think about desire at all. And slowly, um, because every single woman during her cycle, for the women who are cycling, our cervix has two torsions. She goes through this metamorphosis every single month, where during ovulation, she's actually spinning, kind of like spiraling up, sending the current up. And then during menstruation, she kind of descends in the vaginal canal, and then she's kind of spinning downward and pulling us into a descent. And we go through these two currents every single month for as long as we bleed. So physiologically, a woman, even though a huge part of remembering our woman, remembering our feminine essence, and repairing a lot of the ancestral and individual wounds with the feminine, with the masculine, with God, a huge part of it lives inside of our descent in the torsion of going down. It's actually not complete because if you remember, half of our cycle is about coming up.
Mhm.
The Where we gather enough wisdom during our menstrual medicine ceremony, we gather the resources, we gather the healing, we gather the wisdom. We're supposed to actually be coming up from the womb into our heart. This is literally the womb heart continuum that we're always walking during our cycling years. So eventually, it was time for me to come back up. And for the first time, I actually felt like my womb and my heart started merging and kind of like walking closer to one another. And that was when I felt long lost desires from long ago, maybe like some dreams, goals, things like that. But because I was able to go through that descent and heal a lot of those, kind of like integrate a lot of the shadows, by the time I came back up, um, the desires felt whole. They were purified and they were sanctified by God because because of the path of integration that I needed to walk. So I'm gonna say for women who are in the space of like, well, I don't know, I have these desires, but I don't know if they're pure or they're from my ego. If you're still asking that, then your body is probably inviting you into that deep descent, into like the dark, fertile soils of your womb, where you get to meet the very vulnerable and naked parts of your woman and the untold stories of your mother, your grandmother, and the women who have come before you, and how they related to men, to God, to the masculine. Because once you start to meet and integrate those parts and become very familiar with their voices and come more into your own voice, your own expression, the authentic woman that you are, your own essence, by the time that you come back up and you walk from your womb to your heart, you're going to feel like the desires have already been naturally purified because you're bringing a lot of that elder wisdom with you, mother wisdom and elder wisdom into your heart back up so that you're no longer in that space of just like unintegrated maiden shadow, like entitlement or being very graspy or something. Women who are in that space, and there's nothing wrong with we all go through that. When we're in that space, it's really there's a lack of safety. We can't hold ourselves. So we're either in collapse or we're in freeze or we're fawning, over men and hoping that they're going to regulate us. But once we actually walk down from our heart to the womb and do this work, we gather that resource, we gather that safety. We kind of remember what it's like to mother ourselves, to reparent that little girl that never received certain things that she wanted, and to be able to have like enough capacity to say like, okay, I can hold the pain and the liberation. I can hold the tension and the desire. By the time we come back up, it naturally becomes very clear. It's like a embodied clarity but it's not something that you get from a strategy or anything. You literally have to walk through this path of your womb heart continuum of that descent and embodied rise.
Yes, embodied clarity. I love that. As you're sharing that, Julia, it's reminding me of Inanna's descent as she goes into the
Yeah.
underworld and removes all her egoic desire,
Yeah.
the crown and the scepter and the jewels and kind of more of the sparkly, entitled, flashy desires of the world,
Yeah.
becomes raw and exposed and vulnerable and dies and then comes back up to the topside world to reclaim her place as queen of heaven and earth. And that is it, right? That is the
That really is it. And Inanna, I use the story every time when I teach the module of the cervix. I literally just like gave the ladies in my current group that lesson on the cervix. It literally is it because we're kind of like being stripped bare as we go down and go through like the death of those unintegrated shadows so that we can become more whole, and we remember that wholeness.
Yes. Yeah, and it's also that remembrance as well that Christ also
Yeah,
descended for 3 days into the underworld. It was a different type of descent. He wasn't releasing his worldly attachments and his worldly desires, right? He was, fighting the darkness of the underworld and releasing separation. But
yeah,
he also, so there's the archetypal story of descent and resurrection through both the masculine and the feminine
yeah,
archetypally.
absolutely.
Yeah. What do you feel the love of God and the love of Christ? What does that play in what role does that play in our descent and resurrection journey? Like how does the love of God and the love of Christ weave into our descent and resurrection?
Yeah, my descent, I'm gonna say like if I did not have Jesus during my descent, I would have felt really lost because I went really deep in my descent for several years. And the underworld is it's just a place that requires a lot of nervous system capacity to hold, but at the same time that's just your inner holding. So when I look at anything, there's always that masculine and feminine aspect. So there is like I am learning, I'm remembering how to reparent my little girl who feels lost, who feels scared, who feels silenced, and at the same time there is that bigger frame of faith that is holding me in that descent, knowing like God, you're the one who guided me deep into this underworld where I feel like I'm just not even seeing light. And I found some days I feel like I'm suffocating, but it was my faith that actually carried me through some of the very, very, very difficult aspects of the descent of that relational healing. I shared on Instagram recently, like I come from a lot of maternal trauma. And my grandmother's persecution trauma is actually very recent. So it's encoded in my nervous system. So even though I do this work, I teach this work, because I'm human, I can feel certain imprints in a very real and a very raw way. They're just like there. They're not something that we can erase. And during my descent, when I started like working with my tissues, working with my bleed, bringing the medicine of my touch to my own body, the stories really came up. The emotions, the not like unresolved emotions and stories really came up. And I didn't always have that capacity to hold like what was coming up. And I just remember there were a lot of days I was just like literally crying and surrendering all of this to God. I'm just like, God, it's too much. I can't hold it. I want to just lay it at your feet. And I don't have a resolution. I don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, but this is, I'm going to lay it at your feet. And, like, so for me, faith very much guided me throughout my descent. And the coming up journey is actually very interesting because for the longest time, I believed for the feminine, like the only thing we need is descent. And I feel like probably a lot of women still very much relate to that statement because it feels very familiar to our nervous system to be like always descending, always healing, always being in that dark, fertile, creational space. At some point, God is going to call you to come back up. So he actually called me back up. He was like, you know, yeah, like come through all of these gates and bring this integrated wisdom with you and speak it into the world so that you can summon the right people and like just everything into your field for bigger co-creation. So if you like the way that I mean, for me, has played such an instrumental role in this journey that I feel like I wouldn't even have gone into my descent without that faith component because it's just really not a very, for me, it wasn't a very pretty or pleasant experience being kind of stuck in the underworld for several years. But at the end of the day, I also remembered that like there is that co-creational component in the feminine with God. It's not like we're not in this world to just always be healing. As much as I feel it is so important, so much of my work revolves around healing, really. So it's absolutely necessary, but we're also made to be living in this world. We're made to be co-creating with one another and also with God, to be kind of like weaving like the masculine seeds that we're nourishing inside ourselves into reality, into the fabric of reality, birthing new relationships, birthing new realities. And that's the part where a lot of women are asked to come back up from the womb to the heart, to the throat. Now you kind of remembered your voice. So God is going to ask you to use your voice to be that relational specialist, to be speaking love and devotion and intimacy into those around you, into the world. So for me, everything was very divinely orchestrated by God, by how much my physiology needed to heal, my body needed to heal from like a lot of years of severance and trauma. And at the same time, it's also that and here's also the thing. I feel God is using women for a bigger purpose, but I have a very different definition on purpose. I used to believe like it's like something that you do. So, oh, I'm gonna be a coach, I'm gonna be a healer, I'm gonna be an entrepreneur, I'll be a mom, like that's a purpose. But as I was really like kind of navigating this deep relational aspect of God Himself, this eternal community, lately, what I've been feeling so much is that yes, God is using women for His purpose, but it's actually to anchor. I feel that each woman has a very unique beingness that is an expression of intimacy, love, and devotion, but she carries it very differently. It's a very different fragrance, it's a very different kind of like frequency, the one that you carry, the one that I carry, but it is to serve love and devotion. So I no longer feel that God is using us for his bigger purpose to actually do something, but to actually just be you, be the woman that he has made you to be that beautiful daughter, beautiful granddaughter, beautiful, beautiful wife, beautiful sister, beautiful friends, and like just be that, like anchor that frequency in the fabric of reality as a part of this bigger co-creation. And whatever you choose to do from that, you can be coaching, you can be opening like a cupcake shop and baking, like you are actually emanating that frequency. So for me, and it's again, it's like a very, very relational thing because like I do love spending a lot of time with Jesus. And of course, I can look at everything that he did and say, like, wow, he accomplished so much during his short, 3 years on earth during his ministry, but 33 years of ministry. But at the end of the day, what he truly anchored on earth was actually that relational frequency. It's the frequency of love. It's like this coding of love from God, wholeness, love, intimacy that we kind of have forgotten or we have disembodied from. So yeah, so it's that do is important, but then that do comes from the beingness.
Mm. Oh, yeah, that's so beautiful. It's like as you're sharing that, I'm just imagining like we're all an instrument in the divine symphony of life, and we all have our heart song and fragrance to emit. And again, that requires that knowing that that is enough, that we don't have to be doing all the things and be dopamine driven and have the things, and that actually just our beingness as a woman, like that also requires us to be resting in God, to know that we're enough, right? Because I think again, that's the difficult part for women to really remember and embody if they haven't come into union with God yet. There's still that feeling of, am I enough? Is my beingness enough? Right? Or do I need to do more? Do I need to strive? Do I need to prove? Do I need to perform? Right? So it's all, as you're sharing, Julia, it's just this giant permission slip for women to rest back in their feminine design, to rest in their beingness, to let their fragrance and anchoring of love be enough. And it just feels like permission. Everything you're sharing feels like permission.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had my own realization when one day it was like I could be posting a social media post and like teaching and giving like this wisdom, like sharing wisdom on social media. But actually what I really needed to do was to have a bit of difficult conversation with my beloved to work through this little conflict that we were having. And I was like, oh. The past version of me would be like, oh, my purpose is to teach, my purpose is to give this a voice. But then at the end of the day, I'm like, you know what? I think God would rather me to choose the path of relational repair, to restore intimacy, to be love. And like not to say the purpose that the do isn't important, but it's really like the heart of God is truly that intimacy piece. And it's just like the more that I do this work, the more it is that I feel it. Everything about God's character and nature points to intimacy. Everything about the Bible points back to relationship.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes, it's like being the living transmission of love, the relational
Yeah.
expert, the being the transmission of intimacy. And from that place, from overflow, teaching it, serving it, guiding it, stewarding it, but knowing that it's actually the being of it that is the ultimate purpose.
Yes, absolutely.
I love, you said somewhere recently that nature is the second Bible, which I love
Mhm.
so much. I'm like, oh, that's so good and that's so true. And so, um, I think this is a really important conversation piece because there's everything that's in the Bible that we utilize as our source of truth and walking as we walk the path with Christ. And there's so much wisdom of the feminine and nature and eros and creation that's not in the Bible. So I love that you shared that nature is the second Bible. So I'd love for you to speak to that a little bit, because I think that's an important part of the middle path and coming into integration and merging truth and eros together. So yeah, I'd love for you to share a little bit about why is nature the second Bible?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, one of my clients corrected me and said, technically nature is the first Bible because God created the earth before the Bible was written, throughout like a span of hundreds of years. She's absolutely right. So, um, here's the thing. I feel like I guess I'm at a little bit more mature point of walking with God where I'm not easily triggered by certain things because in the beginning I feel a lot of women, especially if they've just left New Age. If I say something that there's not a lot of female physiology filtered perspectives in the Bible, it would sound very triggering. And I've had women on social media kind of like getting very triggered, like, what do you mean it's divinely inspired? I'm like, of course. But when I share the truth about something, it does not devalue the Bible one bit, because think about it, it was written, first of all, the Old Testament was written by authors that were a nomadic people. They didn't have formal education. They lived in a very different world that was purely built on survival. So, there is that cultural, historical relevancy that we need to feel into when we're reading the Bible and understanding, like, okay, Paul's letters, yeah, they're great, but that's not the only thing the Bible ever, because a lot of churches only preach like Paul's letters, people tend to have a little bit of an unhealthy relationship with the Bible. I'm gonna say there's a lot of idolatry, kind of like one of my favorite authors is all about, by all means, love the Bible, but the Bible should not replace your living relationship with God, with Jesus. So for me, I feel for the feminine being, it's especially important since the Bible, all the books were written by men and they were great and so much respect goes into it. It is also important that as you're opening your living book and you're co-creating with God, you're allowing the Bible wisdom to be translated and embodied through you, and you get to share that with the world. And it's not going to be, like you're not going to be a replica of who Paul was or who Moses was. So I have a feeling, this is just my hypothesis, just my feeling that God created nature and then created the feminine to very much mimic nature because that is the feminine aspect of his creations. The masculine aspect would be form, substance, right? The earth, logic, reasoning, systems, things like that. But the very feminine aspect, that mothering aspect, is very much nature. And this is the reason why, for a lot of the women who are not in that relational union with God yet, they find a lot of peace and a lot of comfort in nature because I personally feel that God has embedded a lot of his love codes in nature, so much so that nature inspires something in us and it allows us to rest not only into her, like that primal maternal resonance, but also to reconnect with our bodies. And again, this is not by coincidence. When you are earthing, your blood sugar, actually your blood pressure drops, you sleep better. When you receive sunlight, the sunlight actually regulates your circadian rhythms so that, your body can produce melatonin and gets stored at night so that you can fall asleep on time. It's not a coincidence that we live in a very symbiotic relationship with nature. And this is especially true for the female body that we go through the 4 seasons every single month. We actually very much, cycle from winter, barrenness, void into like the summer, the ripeness, into like the fall harvest. So nature is very much encoded with a lot of what makes the feminine feminine. There's that maternal holding that we receive from nature. And I suppose God probably knew that some of us would forget, what it's like to be walking with him. Some people would probably never have the opportunity to meet Jesus. And I just want to be like completely, factual about this. If you take into account some native indigenous cultures that are living in the jungle, that are living somewhere remote, they're probably not going to have the opportunity to receive the Bible or to hear teachings from Jesus. But what they have is nature. What they have is the motherland. And from my work in the past, with like, I did a lot of plant medicine ceremonies, with the indigenous, and the way that I observed their way of living was actually very much in alignment with God's teachings, even though they didn't know anything about Jesus. They lived in harmony with one another. They respected nature. They took what they needed and they nourished their environment. Basically, they lived in that love harmonics that God has woven into this entire reality. So my guess is that perhaps God knew that some people wouldn't, have an opportunity to know Jesus in this lifetime, but they are given this most potent and beautiful and primal reminder that they're still held, that there is still this nourishment and peace and safety, just like being able to rest in God's arms. So I mean, this is purely my guess. It's not written in the Bible, but this came out of my walk with God.
Mhm. I love that so much. Yeah, I love that so much. I feel God's presence the most when I'm in nature. Deeply, I
Same.
feel God's presence. I feel the eros of the earth. I mean, I feel it's such an embodiment of that integration and union that we've been talking so much about, and and such a nourishment for our feminine as well, to be in the beauty, to be in the pulse, to be in the fragrance and the sounds and the sensuality of everything that nature has to gift us.
Yeah, absolutely. Same.
Mhm. I was living in Costa Rica for the last 4 years in the jungle.
Oh,
I miss the beauty. I miss being fully immersed in beauty and nature all the time. But it does feel good to be back in a city and have a little bit more of that structure and a little bit more of that containment around me as well.
yeah, yeah, we actually need both, but I can imagine what it's like to live. We almost moved to Costa Rica.
Oh,
We
yeah.
used to go there so much, did a lot of plant ceremonies there. We almost moved there, but we ended up moving to Miami, which we live in a neighborhood that's just like the jungle and ocean. So we have like a mini version of Costa Rica here.
All the tropical feels.
Yeah, yeah, love it.
Juliet Love, as we begin to land our plane today, I'm curious if there are any final words, any final pieces that you want to share for the ladies listening, anything you'd like to leave them with before we close our conversation.
Yeah, so um I'm really feeling that we're being called back into our bodies more and more. And I have a feeling that in the next few years, we are going to we're going to be kind of like witnessing even more distortions in the world around union and around masculine and feminine. And I feel this is a really perfect time for us, and if we're not in the space yet, to start to gain literacy over our female physiology, because I feel that this is actually the key. It's a very indirect key. This is not something that we think about when we're like, oh, let me just take another relationship course. Let me learn how to communicate with men better, or let me take another business or money course to grow my business. We tend to like still think in that very black and white, flat type of way, as opposed to um, feeling into the volumetric and like the multidimensional nature of our woman. And we operate truly within the spiral of an ecosystem. And the body is very much in the center of the spiral, meaning like our relationship with everything, with men, with God, with money, with business, with purpose, with life spirals around our relationship with the truth of our female physiology, with the womb heart continuum, with our bleed. So until and unless we have, ownership of what is in the center, we're always going to be kind of like spiraling in a way that's a bit off.
Mm.
So I truly like feel that this is the key for women to return to our biological, creational, female blueprint that is rooted in truth. Not a lot of woo, but like rooted in truth, and to get to know your body more, to get to know this bridge more, and to know how potently creational she is, and and the very important role that she plays in birthing all of the relationships that you're truly desiring to birth. And partially, this also has to do with the female nervous system, which again, like I know I named in my last teaching, like the nervous system model, the teachings that we are familiar with in, just even in the industry, they're very much based on the male biology and physiology. And it doesn't truly serve the female because we have that ovulatory cycle that actually governs, the way that we step into like maybe parasympathetic dominance or sympathetic dominance. So knowing our female physiology is actually being more attuned to our female nervous system, which is rooted in the cervix, rooted in the womb. And I feel like this is the missing piece for so many women, but not too many people talk about it because we tend to not kind of like make the connection, especially with business, especially with something like money or relationship. But this is actually very much the central piece in all of it.
Yes. Yeah, and like you said, it's going to become more and more and more important as time goes on, and there's even more distortion and all the AI and the synthetic and mass produced and all of that to be able to really feel through our bodies that sense of discernment and truth.
Yes.
So important. It's going to be so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially in an AI run type of world, there's something that AI cannot replace, which is womb heart entrainment. When you're sitting with a woman who has an open womb and open heart, this is not something that AI can give you information. But well, even a lot of the truth of our biology is not something that AI is able to give. But that resonance is something that we cannot receive from, something that is artificial. It needs to be a woman to woman type of holding. So I feel like, especially if you have coaches, healers in your field, this is really important. This inner integration piece, so that you can actually hold this resonance field with the people that you're walking with. Especially because AI is going to be, it's not going away. It's going to be more and more popular, just taking over so many things in this world. And what's organic is going to be so cherished.
Absolutely. Yeah, like a prized jewel, like a prized and precious jewel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks for closing us out with that really vital and important reminder. And thank you so much for this conversation, Julia. I know that's going to stir the hearts and wombs of so many women and awaken a deeper remembrance in them on their journey.
Yeah, thank
I'd
you.
love for you to share where we can find you, love, any offerings that you have that you want to share with us today for our listeners.
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram, Juliet___ Tang. You can also find me on Facebook. I'm gonna start becoming a little more active on Facebook, but these days I'm a little more active on Instagram. And my current offering is actually Feminine Codex. It's a 12-month program where I literally teach everything that I just shared. I'm a homemaker. I spend a lot of time in the kitchen. So I really decided to put everything I know into one program to teach women. It is 12 months long because we need that much time to integrate. And it's a bit of that slow, deep spiraling walk, but it is truly a life-changing program. We've already run like 2 rounds. So there's like the third round that we're enrolling right now.
Beautiful. And that's a group program?
Yes, it's group.
Beautiful. So the ladies can receive that entrainment and sisterhood with other women.
Yeah, absolutely. It's important.
So important. Beautiful. Well, we'll leave the links for that below so y'all can find Juliet really easily and shoot either of us a message on Instagram. Let us know what landed for you. If you have any questions for us, anything you want to share, any, deep pieces of wisdom that surfaced for you, we'd love to hear from you. And thank you, Julia, again so much for this conversation. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And we're looking forward to seeing you next time on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Holly. Thank you.